Sarah sat in her room, looking at the wedding invitation with mixed feelings. Her mother, Elena, was getting married again after 5 years of being alone. Sarah should have been happy, but something felt wrong. Sarah was 18 now, with long brown hair and eyes that noticed everything. People said she looked just like her father, David. She missed him every day since the car crash that took him away. The wedding invitation was fancy with gold writing. It read, "Join us as Elena Peterson and Richard Thompson begin their life together." Sarah ran her finger over the raised letters, trying to feel happy for her mother. "Sarah, can you come help me with these flowers?" her mother called from downstairs. Sarah put the invitation down and went to the living room. Her mother was surrounded by flower samples for the wedding. Elena looked younger these days, her face bright with excitement. Her dark hair was pulled back, showing the smile lines around her eyes. "What do you think of these roses for the centerpieces?" Elena asked, holding up a peach-colored rose. "They're nice, Mom," Sarah said, not really caring about flowers. She had other things on her mind. Elena noticed her daughter's mood. "Honey, is everything okay? You've been quiet all week." Sarah wanted to say what was bothering her, but she didn't know how. "I'm fine, just tired from school," she lied. How could she tell her mother that something about Richard made her feel uneasy? Richard Thompson had come into their lives 8 months ago. He was tall with salt and pepper hair, always well-dressed, and very charming. Everyone liked him, especially her mother. But Sarah had noticed little things that didn't add up. "Richard is coming over for dinner tonight," Elena said, checking her watch. "He wants to talk about the honeymoon plans." "Great," Sarah said without enthusiasm. She went to the kitchen to help prepare dinner, her mind filled with questions. Later that evening, Richard arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and a small gift bag for Sarah. "For the best daughter a man could hope to have," he said with a big smile. "Thanks," Sarah said, taking the bag. Inside was a silver bracelet with a small heart charm. It was pretty, but it felt like he was trying too hard. During dinner, Richard talked about his business trips and his plans for their new life together. "I'm thinking of selling my condo downtown," he said. "Maybe we could look for a bigger house, one with a view of the lake." "That sounds wonderful," Elena said, her eyes shining. Sarah watched them talk, feeling like an outsider. When her father was alive, their family had been close, sharing jokes and stories. Now everything was about Richard's plans. "Sarah, Richard has some news that might interest you," Elena said. Richard put down his fork. "I've arranged for a full scholarship to State University for you. A friend of mine is on the board there." Sarah was surprised. "But I already applied to Central College. Dad always wanted me to go there." A shadow crossed Richard's face. "Central is good, but State has better programs. And this way, you won't have any student loans." "That's very generous," Sarah said, feeling uncomfortable. Her father had saved money for her college fund. Why was Richard changing their plans? After dinner, Sarah helped her mother clean up while Richard made phone calls in the living room. "Mom, did you know Dad wanted me to go to Central College?" she asked quietly. "Yes, but honey, Richard is just trying to help," Elena replied. "He cares about your future." Sarah nodded, but deep down, she wondered why Richard was trying to change everything about their lives. Why was he so interested in her college plans? And why did he never want to talk about her father? Later that night, Sarah sat at her computer and typed Richard Thompson into the search engine. She hadn't told her mother, but she was going to find out who Richard really was before it was too late. Sarah spent hours searching for information about Richard online. She found his business website and some old social media accounts, but nothing seemed strange. Richard Thompson owned a successful investment company and had many happy clients, but Sarah still felt that something was off. The next morning, Sarah came down to breakfast to find her mother making pancakes, humming a happy tune. The kitchen smelled like butter and maple syrup, just like when her father was alive. "Morning, honey," Elena said, flipping a pancake. I was thinking we could go shopping for your bridesmaid dress today. Sarah poured herself some orange juice. Mom, how much do you really know about Richard? Elena's smile faded a little. What do you mean? Where did he grow up? Where did he go to school? Has he been married before? Sarah asked. Sarah, why are you asking these questions? Richard and I have known each other for almost a year. I just think it's strange that he never talks about his past, Sarah said. Elena put a plate of pancakes in front of Sarah. He's a private person. Not everyone likes to share everything about themselves. Dad wasn't like that, Sarah said quietly. Elena's face softened. Honey, I know you miss your father. I miss him too. But Richard is different from your dad, and that's okay. Sarah ate her breakfast in silence. Her mother was too much in love to see what was happening. Later that day, they went shopping at the mall. While her mother was trying on dresses, Sarah noticed Richard's name on the caller ID when Elena's phone rang. Can you answer that, honey? Elena called from the fitting room. Sarah picked up the phone. Hello. Sarah, it's Richard. Is your mother there? His voice sounded different on the phone, colder somehow. She's trying on dresses, Sarah said. Listen, I need you to tell her something, Richard said. I'll be out of town until Thursday. Business emergency. Tell her I'll call her tonight. Where are you going? Sarah asked. There was a pause. Just a quick trip to Chicago. Client meeting. After Sarah ended the call, she had an idea. She opened her mother's phone and quickly looked through recent text messages between her mom and Richard. Most were just normal couple texts, but one caught her eye. Last week, Richard had told her mother he was at a business dinner in Seattle, but in texts to someone else, he mentioned being in Boston that same night. Sarah quickly put the phone down as her mother came out of the fitting room in a beautiful cream-colored dress. What do you think? Elena asked, twirling around. You look beautiful, Mom, Sarah said honestly. Richard called. He said he has to go to Chicago until Thursday. Oh, Elena looked disappointed. He was supposed to help with the wedding cake tasting tomorrow. On the drive home, Sarah thought about Richard's lie. Why would he say he was in Seattle when he was really in Boston? What else was he lying about? When they got home, Sarah went straight to her room and called her best friend, Lily. I need your help, Sarah said. Remember how your dad is a police officer? Yeah. Why? Lily asked. Can he run a background check on someone? Lily was quiet for a moment. He's not supposed to do that unless it's for a case. Please, Lily. I think my mom might be in danger, Sarah said. Is this about Richard? Lily asked. My mom says he's really nice. Everyone thinks he's nice, but something's not right, Sarah explained. He lied about where he was last week, and he's trying to control everything in our lives. After some convincing, Lily agreed to ask her dad, but warned Sarah that it might take a few days. That night, while her mother was on the phone with Richard, Sarah went into the home office to look for more clues. In the desk drawer, she found a folder with wedding paperwork. Inside was a copy of Richard's driver's license for the marriage license application. Sarah stared at the birth date on the license. According to this, Richard was 52 years old, not 45 like he told everyone. It was a small lie, but why lie about your age? As Sarah put the folder back, she noticed something else, an old photo that had fallen behind the desk. She picked it up and her heart stopped. The photo showed a younger Richard standing next to her father at what looked like a company party. He knew Dad, Sarah whispered to herself. He knew Dad, and he lied about it. Sarah's hand shook as she held the photo. Her father, David, stood smiling next to Richard at what looked like a company party. They were both wearing suits with name tags. The photo was dated just 2 years before her father died. This can't be right, Sarah whispered to herself. She remembered clearly when her mother first introduced Richard. He had said, I wish I could have met your father. He sounds like he was a wonderful man. It was a complete lie. Sarah heard her mother coming up the stairs. Quickly, she took a picture of the photo with her phone and put the original back where she found it. "Sarah, what are you doing in here?" Elena asked, standing in the doorway. "Just looking for some stamps," Sarah lied, feeling guilty. "They're in the kitchen drawer," Elena said. "Richard's coming back tomorrow instead of Thursday. Isn't that nice? He said he finished his meetings early so he could help with the wedding plans." "Great," Sarah said, forcing a smile. She needed to learn more before Richard came back. The next morning, Sarah skipped school. She waited until her mother left for work, then began searching the house for more information. In her mother's bedroom, she found a box of her father's old things. Inside were work papers, old business cards, and a small notebook. The notebook was her father's work journal. Sarah flipped through it, scanning for Richard's name. Near the end, she found several entries that made her heart race. May 15. Noticed discrepancies in company accounts. Someone transferred $50,000 to an offshore account. Need to investigate. May 28. More money missing. Spoke with RT about suspicions. He seemed nervous. June 10. Found evidence. RT definitely involved in missing funds. Meeting with him tomorrow to confront. The last entry was dated just 3 days before her father's car accident. Sarah's phone rang, making her jump. It was Lily. "My dad found some stuff on Richard," Lily said. "He used to work at a company called Westfield Investments. Then he changed his name from Richard Taylor to Richard Thompson about 5 years ago." 5 years ago, Sarah repeated. "That's when my dad died." "There's more," Lily continued. "He was investigated for fraud at 2 different companies, but charges were dropped both times. And guess what? He's been married twice before, not once like he told your mom." Sarah thanked Lily and hung up. Everything was starting to make sense. Richard had worked with her father. Her father had discovered Richard was stealing money. And then, just days after her father wrote about confronting Richard, he died in a car accident. Sarah needed more proof. She remembered her father's laptop was stored in the attic. It took her an hour to find it under old Christmas decorations. The laptop was dusty and the battery was dead, but when she plugged it in, it still worked. She searched through old files, finding nothing unusual at first. Then she checked the email. Most messages were work-related, but in a folder marked legal, she found emails between her father and a lawyer. Her father had been gathering evidence against someone at his company who was stealing money. The last email included attached bank records showing transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands. Sarah downloaded the files onto a USB drive. Just as she finished, she heard the front door open. "Sarah, are you home?" It was Richard's voice. Sarah quickly shut the laptop and hid the USB drive in her pocket. She hadn't expected Richard to come to the house when her mother wasn't home. "I'm up here," she called, her heart pounding. "Just getting some old school books from the attic." She heard his footsteps coming up the stairs. She needed to act normal. Richard couldn't know what she had discovered. "Your mother said you were at school," Richard said, appearing at the attic entrance. His smile seemed forced as he looked around the attic, his eyes stopping on her father's laptop. "What are you doing with that?" he asked, his voice suddenly cold. "I was looking for old family photos for a school project," Sarah lied. Richard stared at her for a long moment. "Your mother mentioned you've been asking questions about me." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The way he was looking at her made her realize something important. Richard knew she was onto him, and he was dangerous. Sarah tried to stay calm as Richard watched her. The USB drive felt heavy in her pocket. Everything depended on her acting normal right now. "What kind of questions?" Sarah asked, trying to sound innocent. Richard stepped closer. "Your mother says you've been asking about my past, where I grew up, if I've been married before." His voice was friendly, but his eyes were cold. "I just want to know more about the man my mom is marrying," Sarah said with a shrug. "That's normal, right?" Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. I should have been more open with you. He glanced at the laptop again. Your father was a good man. Did I ever tell you I met him once? Sarah's heart raced. This was a test. Richard was checking to see what she knew. No, you said you never met him. Sarah replied carefully. Richard nodded. That's right. Just checking if you were paying attention. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Why don't we go downstairs and talk? I can tell you anything you want to know. Sarah didn't want to be alone with Richard, but she couldn't think of a reason to say no. She followed him downstairs to the kitchen, making sure to stay a few steps behind him. Would you like some tea? Richard asked, filling the kettle with water. Sure, Sarah said, sitting at the kitchen table. She texted Lily under the table. Richard here alone with me. Call in 5 minutes with excuse to pick me up. Richard set 2 cups on the table and sat across from her. So, what would you like to know? Sarah decided to start with something simple. Where did you grow up? Boston, Richard said smoothly. My father was a lawyer, my mother a teacher. I went to Harvard for business school, then worked at several investment firms before starting my own company. Have you been married before? Sarah asked. Richard hesitated for just a second. Once. We divorced after 3 years. No children. Sarah knew he was lying about having only one previous marriage, but she nodded as if she believed him. And how did you meet my mom? She asked. At a charity event last year, Richard said, sipping his tea. She was volunteering, and I was a donor. It was love at first sight. He smiled. Now my turn for a question. Why were you really looking at your father's old laptop? Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. It was Lily. Hello, Sarah answered, feeling relieved. I'm outside your house, Lily said loudly enough that Richard could hear. We have that study group at the library, remember? Oh, right. I forgot, Sarah said. I'll be right out. She hung up and stood. Sorry, I have to go. School project due tomorrow. Richard stood too, blocking her path to the door. You didn't answer my question about the laptop. Sarah's mouth felt dry. Like I said, just looking for old photos. Richard took a step toward her. Sarah, I hope you're not getting strange ideas. Sometimes when people lose a parent, they look for someone to blame. Your father's accident was tragic, but it was just that. An accident. The kettle whistled loudly, making Sarah jump. Richard turned to take it off the stove, and Sarah quickly moved toward the door. We can talk more later, she called over her shoulder. Lily's waiting. Outside, Sarah rushed to Lily's car and got in. Drive, she said. As they pulled away, Sarah saw Richard watching from the window. Her hands were shaking. What happened? Lily asked. He knows I'm onto him, Sarah said. He was testing me, asking about the laptop. She pulled out the USB drive. I found proof that my dad was investigating Richard for stealing money from the company before he died. Do you think Richard had something to do with your dad's accident? Lily asked, her eyes wide. Sarah nodded. I think he might have killed my dad, and now he's trying to marry my mom. We should go to the police, Lily said. Not yet, Sarah replied. I need more proof. She thought for a moment. The wedding is in 4 days. I need to convince my mom before then. They drove to Lily's house, where Sarah plugged in the USB drive. Together, they looked through the files. There were bank statements showing large sums of money disappearing from company accounts and reappearing in offshore accounts. And there were photos that clearly showed Richard with her father at company events. This is it, Sarah said. Proof that he lied about knowing my dad. She scrolled through more files and stopped suddenly. Look at this. It was an email from her father to his lawyer, dated 3 days before the accident. I'm meeting with RT tomorrow to confront him about the missing funds. If anything happens to me, all evidence is in this file. Sarah and Lily printed all the important files and put them in a folder. They needed to show Elena the truth about Richard, but Sarah was worried her mother wouldn't believe her. I need to find out exactly what happened to Dad, Sarah said. The police report said his brakes failed on a mountain road. But what if that wasn't an accident? My dad can help, Lily suggested. He knows people at the police station. Sarah shook her head. Richard might find out if we ask police questions. We need to be careful. That evening, Sarah went home with her folder of evidence hidden in her backpack. Elena was in the kitchen making dinner, looking happy. "There you are," Elena said. "Richard told me you two had a nice talk today." Sarah forced a smile. "Yes, we did. He's bringing his sister to dinner tomorrow." Elena continued. "Isn't that nice? You'll finally meet some of his family before the wedding." Sarah remembered that Richard had told them he only had one sister who lived in Australia. But Lily's research showed he had no siblings at all. More lies. "Mom, can we talk?" Sarah asked. "Of course, honey. What's up?" Sarah took a deep breath. "It's about Richard. I don't think he's who he says he is." Elena's smile faded. "Not this again, Sarah. Please, just listen," Sarah begged. "He knew Dad. I found a photo of them together at a company party." Elena looked confused. "That's impossible. Richard moved here from Boston last year." "He's lying, Mom. He worked with Dad at Westfield Investments. Dad was investigating him for stealing money before he died." Elena put down her cooking spoon. "Sarah, this has to stop. I know it's hard to accept someone new in our lives, but making up stories won't help." "I'm not making it up." Sarah pulled out the photo of Richard and her father. "Look." Elena looked at the photo for a long time. "This could be anyone who looks like Richard." "Mom, please believe me. Richard is dangerous. I think he might have had something to do with Dad's accident." Elena's face hardened. "That's enough. Your father died in an accident. The brakes on his car failed. It was terrible, but it was no one's fault." "But Mom." "No more, Sarah," Elena said firmly. "I want you to apologize to Richard when he comes over tomorrow." Sarah went to her room feeling defeated. Her mother wouldn't listen. She needed more proof. The next morning, Sarah called her father's old friend Tom, who had worked with him at Westfield. "Tom, it's Sarah Peterson," she said when he answered. "Sarah, how are you? How's your mom?" "We're okay," Sarah said. "Mom's getting married again." "That's wonderful news," Tom said. "Who's the lucky guy?" "His name is Richard Thompson. He says he's from Boston." There was a long pause. "Richard Thompson. Are you sure that's his name?" "He used to be Richard Taylor," Sarah said. "Did you know him?" Tom's voice became serious. "Sarah, your dad and Richard worked together, but they weren't friends. Your dad caught Richard stealing from the company." Sarah's heart raced. "What happened?" "Your dad was building a case against him. Richard was going to go to jail, but then your dad had his accident. After that, the investigation was dropped. Richard left town, and we never heard from him again." "Tom, do you think Richard could have done something to my dad's car?" Sarah asked. Tom was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, Sarah. But your dad was meeting Richard the day before the accident. He was very worried." After hanging up, Sarah knew what she had to do. Her mother wouldn't believe her without solid proof. She needed to find out what really happened to her father's car. She searched online for the name of the mechanic who had examined her father's car after the accident. Frank's auto shop was still in business on the other side of town. Sarah took a bus there that afternoon. Frank was an older man with greasy hands and kind eyes. When Sarah explained who she was, his face softened. "I remember that car," Frank said. "Terrible thing. Brake lines were cut clean through." Sarah felt like the floor was dropping beneath her. "Cut. But the police report said they failed." Frank looked uncomfortable. "That's what they wrote, but any mechanic could see those lines were cut. I told the police, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to call it anything but an accident." Sarah's hands trembled as she took out her phone. "Would you be willing to sign a statement about what you saw?" Frank nodded slowly. "For David Peterson's daughter." "Absolutely. Your father was a good man." Sarah left the shop with Frank's signed statement and photos of the original brake line damage that he had kept in his files. Now she had proof. Her father hadn't died in an accident. Someone had killed him, and that someone was about to marry her mother in 3 days. Sarah rushed home with the mechanic's statement and photos in her bag. Now she had real proof. She had to show her mother right away. When she got home, she found Alina and Richard sitting in the living room, looking at wedding photos on Richard's laptop. They were laughing and holding hands. Sarah's heart sank. How could she ruin her mother's happiness? But she had to tell the truth. "Mom, can I talk to you alone?" Sarah asked. Richard smiled at her. "Hello, Sarah. Your mother told me you have some concerns about me." Alina patted the couch next to her. "Sit down, honey. Richard and I were just talking about you. He wants to clear up any misunderstandings." Sarah stayed standing. "Mom, please. This is important." Richard closed his laptop. "Sarah, I understand you found an old photo of me with your father. I should have been honest about knowing him. We worked at the same company years ago, but we weren't close." Sarah was surprised. Richard was admitting to knowing her father. This was a new trick. "If I didn't mention it before," Richard continued, "it was because I didn't want to bring up painful memories for your mother." Alina squeezed Richard's hand. "See, Sarah, there's a simple explanation. That doesn't explain why you were stealing money from the company," Sarah said, looking straight at Richard, "or why Dad's brake lines were cut right after he found out about it." Richard's smile disappeared. Alina looked confused. "What are you talking about?" Alina asked. Sarah pulled out the mechanic's statement. Frank from the auto shop kept records. Dad's brake lines were cut. It wasn't an accident. Alina took the paper with shaking hands. Richard's face had gone pale. "This is ridiculous," Richard said. "That mechanic doesn't know what he's talking about." "Then why did you change your name after Dad died?" Sarah asked. "And why did you tell Mom you've only been married once when you've been married twice before?" Alina looked up from the paper. "Richard, is this true?" Richard stood up. "Alina, your daughter is very troubled. She's making things up because she doesn't want us to be happy." "I have proof," Sarah said. She pulled out the USB drive. "Dad was investigating you for stealing money. He was going to report you to the police the day before he died." Richard's face changed. The nice mask disappeared, replaced by something cold and angry. "Give me that," he said, reaching for the USB drive. Sarah stepped back. "I have copies of everything. I know what you did." Alina stood up, her face pale. "Richard, what is Sarah talking about? Did you know David before? Did you steal from his company?" Richard looked from Alina to Sarah. Then he did something that shocked them both. He laughed. "Your husband was going to ruin me," he said to Alina. "He found out about the money, and he was too honest to keep quiet. I needed him gone." Alina gasped. You killed him." "I didn't push his car off that road," Richard said coldly. "But I made sure he couldn't stop when he reached that sharp turn." Sarah couldn't believe Richard was admitting everything. But then she saw him reach into his jacket pocket. "Mom, watch out," Sarah cried. Richard pulled out a small gun. "Both of you, sit down. Now." Alina's eyes were wide with fear. "Richard, please, this isn't you." "You don't know me at all," Richard said. "I need your signature on some papers, Alina. Then I'll have access to all your accounts. Your husband left you very well off." "So that's what this was all about?" Alina asked, her voice shaking. "Money. It was always about money," Richard said. "Now sit down while I get the papers." Sarah's mind raced. She had to do something. Her phone was in her pocket. Could she call for help? Richard pointed the gun at her. "Don't even think about it. Give me your phone." Sarah handed over her phone. Richard put it on the table. "Stay here, both of you," he ordered, backing toward the study where the papers were kept. "If you try to leave, I'll know." As soon as Richard was out of sight, Sarah whispered to her mother, "We have to get out of here." Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. It's okay, Mom, Sarah said, but we need to leave now. The back door is our best chance. They stood up quietly and moved toward the kitchen. Sarah could hear Richard opening drawers in the study. They were almost to the back door when Sarah's phone rang loudly on the table. Sarah, Richard shouted from the study. Don't move. Sarah grabbed her mother's hand. Run, she cried, pushing open the back door. They ran into the yard just as Richard rushed into the kitchen behind them. Sarah and Elena ran across the backyard toward the neighbor's house. They could hear Richard's footsteps behind them. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She had been right about Richard all along, but now they were in real danger. Mrs. Wilson's house, Elena gasped as they ran. She's home. They reached the fence that separated their yard from Mrs. Wilson's property. Sarah helped her mother climb over, then followed quickly. Richard was getting closer. Help! Elena shouted as they ran to Mrs. Wilson's back door. Please help us. The door opened, and Mrs. Wilson, an older woman with gray hair, looked out in surprise. Elena, what's wrong? Call the police, Sarah said as they rushed inside. Please, call them now. Mrs. Wilson looked confused but reached for her phone. What's happening? A man is trying to hurt us, Elena said, her voice shaking. Please, we need to lock the doors. Sarah locked the back door just as Richard appeared at the fence. His face was red with anger. He still had the gun. He has a gun, Sarah warned. Get away from the windows. Mrs. Wilson's eyes went wide as she dialed 911. Yes, emergency, she said into the phone. There's a man with a gun. Please come quickly. They moved to the center of the house, away from windows and doors. Sarah could see Richard walking around the outside of Mrs. Wilson's house, looking for a way in. The police are coming, Mrs. Wilson said after hanging up. They said to stay inside and away from doors and windows. Elena was crying softly. I can't believe this is happening. Richard seemed so perfect. How could I have been so blind? Sarah put her arm around her mother. He fooled a lot of people, Mom, not just you. There was a loud crash from the front of the house. Richard had broken a window. He's trying to get in, Mrs. Wilson whispered in fear. We need to hide. The basement, Mrs. Wilson said. This way. They hurried down the basement stairs and closed the door behind them. Mrs. Wilson locked it and pushed a heavy shelf in front of it. The police will be here soon, Sarah said, trying to sound brave. But she was terrified. What if the police didn't come in time? They heard Richard moving around upstairs, opening doors, looking for them. The basement had no windows and only one door. They were trapped if he found them. There's another way out, Mrs. Wilson whispered. Through the old coal chute. It leads to the side of the house. She showed them a small door in the wall, hidden behind some boxes. It was meant for delivering coal many years ago, but now it could be their escape. It's small, but I think you two can fit, Mrs. Wilson said. They could hear footsteps overhead getting closer to the basement door. Then they heard Richard's voice. I know you're down there, he called. Come out now, and no one gets hurt. Sarah and Elena exchanged terrified looks. They didn't believe him. You go first, Mom, Sarah whispered. I'll follow. Elena shook her head. No, you go. I'll help Mrs. Wilson move these boxes. Sarah knew there was no time to argue. She crawled through the small opening. It was dark and dusty, but she kept going. Behind her, she could hear Richard banging on the basement door. When Sarah reached the end of the coal chute, she pushed open a rusty metal door. She was outside on the side of the house. In the distance, she could hear police sirens. Hurry, Mom. She called back into the chute. Elena appeared a moment later, covered in dust but unharmed. Sarah helped her out. Mrs. Wilson? Sarah asked. She's hiding behind the water heater, Elena explained. She said she was too old to crawl through. The police sirens were getting closer. Sarah and Elena ran toward the front of the house, waving their arms to flag down the police cars that were just turning onto the street. "Help!" Sarah shouted. "He's inside the house. He has a gun." Two police cars screeched to a stop. Officers jumped out with their weapons drawn. "Stay back," one officer told Sarah and Elena. The others ran toward the house. Sarah held her mother's hand tightly as they watched the police surround Mrs. Wilson's house. More police cars arrived. An officer led them to a safe distance and began asking questions about what had happened. "His name is Richard Thompson," Sarah explained. "But he used to be Richard Taylor. He killed my father 5 years ago. And now he was trying to get my mom's money." As she spoke, they heard shouting from the house, then two loud bangs that made Elena jump. "Shots fired!" Someone yelled. "Officer down!" More police officers rushed toward Mrs. Wilson's house. Sarah and Elena held each other tightly as they waited behind a police car. An ambulance arrived with flashing lights and loud sirens. "What's happening?" Elena whispered, her face pale with fear. A young police officer stayed with them. "We have the situation under control, ma'am," he said, but his tight expression told a different story. Minutes felt like hours. Then they saw paramedics rushing into the house. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Wilson. The kind neighbor had helped them. And now she might be hurt because of Richard. Finally, after what seemed like forever, they saw the paramedics coming out with someone on a stretcher. It was a police officer with a bandage on his shoulder. "Is he going to be okay?" Sarah asked the officer standing with them. "Yes, the bullet just grazed him," the officer replied. "Your neighbor is safe too. She's still inside with other officers." Sarah and Elena breathed sighs of relief. But where was Richard? Their question was answered moments later when 4 police officers came out of the house with Richard between them. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and there was blood on his face. He had been caught. As the officers led Richard to a police car, he looked directly at Sarah and Elena. His eyes were filled with hate. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Don't worry," the officer said, noticing Sarah's fear. "He's going away for a long time." Richard was put into a police car and driven away. Another officer came to talk to Sarah and Elena. "I'm Detective Morris," she said. "We need to take your statements about what happened." At the police station, Sarah and Elena told the whole story. Sarah showed Detective Morris all the evidence she had collected. The photo of Richard with her father's journal entries, the emails, the mechanic's statement, and everything else. "This is very thorough work," Detective Morris said, looking impressed. "You've built quite a case against Mr. Thompson. Is it enough to charge him with my father's murder?" Sarah asked. "With the mechanic's statement about the brake lines being cut, we can reopen your father's case," Detective Morris said. "And we already have him on attempted kidnapping and assault with a deadly weapon from today." Elena, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "I can't believe I almost married him. I brought that monster into our lives." Her voice broke. Sarah took her mother's hand. "It's not your fault, Mom. He fooled everyone." After hours at the police station, they were finally allowed to go home. But their house felt different now. The police had searched it and found the gun Richard had hidden, plus fake passports and other documents in his bags. "We can't stay here tonight," Elena said, looking around the living room where Richard had threatened them just hours ago. "We'll go to a hotel," Sarah suggested. As they packed overnight bags, Sarah found the wedding invitation on her desk. The wedding was supposed to be tomorrow. She showed it to her mother. Elena stared at it for a long moment, then slowly tore it in half. "I guess I need to make some calls," she said with a sad smile. That night in the hotel, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how close they had come to disaster. If she hadn't been suspicious of Richard, if she hadn't investigated him, her mother might have married a murderer. Elena came and sat on the edge of Sarah's bed. "I keep thinking about your father," she said softly. "He always said you were smart and brave. He was right." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "I miss him." Me too, Elena said. But you know what? He was with us today. He was protecting us through you. Sarah smiled through her tears. Her father had always taught her to trust her instincts and stand up for the truth. Today, those lessons had saved their lives. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Sarah asked her mother. Elena nodded and squeezed Sarah's hand. Yes, we are, because we have each other. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, washing away the terrible day. Tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow, they would begin to heal. 3 months later, Sarah sat in the courtroom, watching as Richard was brought in by 2 guards. He looked different now, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. The confident, charming man who had almost become her stepfather was gone. Elena sat beside Sarah, holding her hand tightly. On Sarah's other side was Lily, who had been there for them every step of the way. Behind them sat Mrs. Wilson, who had become a close friend after the terrible day at her house. The judge called the court to order. Today was the day Richard would be sentenced. He had already been found guilty of attempted kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and most importantly, the murder of Sarah's father. The evidence Sarah had collected had been crucial to the case. The mechanic's statement about the cut brake lines, her father's emails and journal entries, the bank records showing stolen money. All of it had helped prove that Richard had killed her father to cover up his crimes. The defendant will rise, the judge said. Richard stood slowly, his eyes fixed on the floor. He wouldn't look at Sarah or Elena. Richard Thompson, formerly known as Richard Taylor, you have been found guilty of first-degree murder, embezzlement, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted kidnapping, the judge said in a stern voice. These crimes show a pattern of deception and violence that the court finds deeply disturbing. Sarah held her breath as the judge announced the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was over. Richard would never hurt anyone again. As the guards led Richard away, he finally looked up at Sarah. There was no hate in his eyes now, just defeat. Sarah didn't feel happy or satisfied, just relieved that justice had been done. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Sarah, how does it feel to know your father's killer is going to prison? One reporter asked. Elena stepped in front of Sarah. My daughter showed incredible courage in uncovering the truth. We're grateful for justice, but today is also painful. We're remembering the man we lost. Back at home, their new home, because they couldn't bear to live in the old house anymore. Sarah sat on the porch swing. The same swing her father had put up years ago, which they had moved to the new house. It was one of the few things they had kept. Elena brought out 2 cups of hot chocolate and sat beside her daughter. You know what today is? She asked. Sarah nodded. It would have been her parents' anniversary. 23 years, she said. Your father would be so proud of you, Elena said. You've grown into exactly the kind of person he hoped you would be. Brave, smart, and caring. Sarah smiled. Remember how he always said, trust your instincts? Yes, Elena laughed. And that's exactly what you did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset. Sarah had changed in these past months. She had learned how strong she could be, how important it was to stand up for the truth even when no one believed her. I'm thinking of studying law in college, Sarah said suddenly. I want to help people find justice, like we did. Elena smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. The doorbell rang. It was Lily and Tom, her father's old friend, coming for dinner. They had all become close during the trial. Tom had shared stories about Sarah's father that she had never heard before, helping her feel closer to him even though he was gone. Hey, future lawyer, Lily said, hugging Sarah. Ready to celebrate. Celebrate what? Sarah asked. Life, Tom said simply, moving forward while remembering the past. As they went inside, Sarah looked back at the porch swing one last time. She could almost see her father sitting there, smiling at her with pride. The pain of losing him would never completely go away. But now there was peace too, knowing that justice had been served. Thanks, Dad, she whispered. for teaching me to listen to my heart." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the oak tree in the yard. As if in response, Sarah smiled and went inside to join her family, the one she had saved, and the new extended one she had found through this difficult journey. Life would go on, different but still good. Sarah had learned that sometimes the most important thing was not running away from difficult truths, but facing them with courage. And that was a lesson she would carry with her forever.